How are you? You alright? You good?
I'm good, yeah. Just heard a bang.
I heard that as well.
Yeah, but you didn't seem to have any concern in your face, so I thought, okay,
Well,
you
I
mustn't have heard it.
No, I just didn't hear a child cry or a dog bark, so it didn't seem like that important.
I think he's rolled off the bed again.
Yeah,
because I can hear little paws coming towards the door.
Oh, yeah, the dog did that. It was last night, wasn't it? He rolled off the bed in the middle of the night.
And I'd already stopped him from rolling off. And then he still pushed himself back.
Oh, little divvy. Anyway, welcome back if you've joined us before, or welcome if you haven't joined us before. This is A Drunk History of Middle-earth, which is a podcast where we talk about Tolkien as if we were your pals at the pub. I'm joined by my lovely wife, Rebecca, and I am Chris. And if this is your first time joining us, this is a pretty good one. This is Balrogs, which are the big, scary, horrible fire demons that we know from Moria, which is pretty cool. However, like a lot of things to do with this podcast, I didn't realise just how much there was to talk about. Like, individually, I think I'd read most of the things.
Yeah.
But then putting it all together was a bit of a bastard. So yeah, we're going to talk about Balrogs today, which is dead exciting. Best known as the Maiar who served Morgoth, spirits of flame and shadow. And the most well-known Balrog is Durin's Bane, which was awoken under the Misty Mountains and it wrecked the dwarves, right? It's the reason why Moria is abandoned and why it's called like the Black Pit and why it's a wreck when the Fellowship go through it. And this Balrog...
And him and Gandalf fight.
Yes. And eventually he is killed by Gandalf after an epic battle.
Falling through the earth.
Exactly. They fell for a fucking long time. And, quite amazingly... Well, no, not quite amazingly. It's very expected by now. They underwent a ridiculous amount of transformation during Tolkien's lifetime of writing. So
shock.
Yeah, there are many different versions of Balrogs. So we'll deal with the history first, right? We'll deal with every time they appear, and then what we know about them before we move on to some of the other versions of them and some of the more esoteric aspects of Balrogs, like why they're so powerful, blah blah blah. So to get it out of the way first, they were essentially demons, right? They are essentially the demons of Tolkien's Legendarium. The earliest names for them in Quenya was the Valar Aukar, which the singular form being Valar Auko, and in Sindarin we have Balrog, both of which mean demon of power or demon of might. That's what the Valar means. So Valar in Quenya, or Valar, means power. So that, again, that's, so for anyone who's wondering why the name Valar pops up to do with Balrogs, it's because it's the Quenya word for power or might. In Quenya, again, like I mentioned, that's Val is power. That's the root of the word. And in Sindarin is Bal. So Val and Bal in Sindarin and Quenya mean the same thing, which is power. Early writings make reference to them being called the Balrogath and of the race of the Umayyad, which I assume is an early name for the Maiar who were corrupted by Melkor during the discord of, the Ainulindale. That Tolkien used to have a word for those Maiar and they called them Umayyad, which I thought was pretty cool. It's not really expound. There was a load of little interesting tidbit shit that I found while I was researching this.
The anti-Maiar.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And in Old English, you might remember some of this though, because the word Balrog may have been Bealuag and Bealubroga, which mean evil outlaw or evil terror. And like I said, these might sound familiar because during our werewolf episodes.
Yeah. Wag.
That's where Wag comes from, exactly. And the root is there for both of them. So if nothing else...
Full circle moment for you all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you listen to every episode, then, this might be a bit of a callback. Tolkien was efficient, if nothing else. He was efficient with his language use. So the Balrogs, we know that they served Morgoth, and either they served... So some of them might have served him right from the beginning with the Ainulindale, or some of them might have come slightly later and were corrupted to his service. And a quote from the Silmarillion that describes their service is, "For of the Maiar, many were drawn to his splendour in the days of his greatness, and remained in that allegiance down into his darkness. And others he corrupted afterwards to his service with lies and treacherous gifts. Dreadful among these spirits were the Valaraukar, the scourges of fire that in Middle-earth were called the Balrogs, demons of terror." And rightfully so, they were fucking terrifying. Like, they were, it's like out and out, just a raw power of terror. The idea of something of shadow and flame.
So are they quite equivalent to Melkor?
They were up there in terms of power. They were very, very up there.
But just evil on their own accord.
They
Not
were
because of Melkor.
No, they were evil because of him. Yeah, they were corrupted
okay.
They were corrupted to him.
Okay.
But they're the Lord of the king, like the leader of the Balrogs, is very close in power, I think, to Sauron. Because they're all Maiar still. Like, so Balrogs are Maiar, Gandalf's a Maiar, Sauron, Saruman, they're all Maiar. Melkor is a Valar, which is on, but they're all together. I know.
Yeah.
Which is the collective term for the spirits. So they often cloak themselves. Well, they did cloak themselves in flame and shadow. They're described as having hearts of flame, and they usually carried weapons, and their weapons were usually whips and swords. But there's some others like axes that have been used. And like I mentioned, they were with Morgoth in the earliest days. And after the Spring of Arda, and when Melkor destroyed the two lamps, that's the earliest reference I could find, was that after the destruction of the lamps, in that darkness before the trees, that's apparently when they took on their final form in like the earliest versions of the writing.
I'd be interested to know what other race uses whips.
Orcs.
I know that's a random...
Orcs do. They've got a song called "Where There's a Whip, There's a Way."
Ah, right, okay.
Yeah. It
was just a random question.
Whip, where there's a whip, there's a way. Yeah, like where there's a whip, there's a way.
Does your whip hang low? Does it wobble to and fro?
Absolutely, yeah. Mine does.
Can you tie it in a knot? Can you tie it in a bow?
Aye. So yeah, Morgoth gathered his strength in Autumnal, which he delved underneath the northern, in the darkness beyond the northern mountains, like his first stronghold. And another quote about them states that in Autumnal he gathered his demons about him, those spirits who first adhered to him in the days of his splendour and became most like him in their corruption. It's most like him in his corruption. Their hearts were afire, but they were cloaked in darkness, and terror went before them. They had whips of flames. Balrogs they were named in Middle-earth in later days. I also found some reference to them being active in the Battle of the Powers. And the Battle of the Powers, for anyone not 100% familiar, is... This was the battle that was fought for the sake of the elves when they first woke up. So the Valar said, we need to protect them. We need to remove Morgoth's influence from Middle-earth because he's going to corrupt the whole race. And he's like, so we'd also heard stories at that point that Morgoth had started to carry them off into the darkness and turn them into orcs. And it was that fight where they peel back the roof of Autumnal and Morgoth gets arrested. Basically, like Tulkas wrestles him, binds him in the chain, and they put him in prison for 3 ages. There's some reference to them being active in that battle, and it said that, which is interesting, right? Because this was in writing that didn't make it into the published Silmarillion, but we have writing here about Balrogs directly attacking Manwë, which I didn't think would ever be a thing. But there's a quote I found is, "Thence, seeing that all was lost for that time, he sent forth on a sudden a host of Balrogs, the last of his servants that remained, and they assailed the standard of Manwë, as it were a tide of flame, but they were withered in the wind of his wrath, and slain with the lightning of his sword. And Melkor stood at last alone. Then since he was but one against many, Tulkas stood forth as champion of the Valar, and wrestled him and cast him upon his face, and bound him with the chain Angainor. Thus ended the first war of the West upon the North." So that was like in a last-ditch effort. And in the Silmarillion, we just get the passage that the roof of Autumno is peeled back and like Tulkas wrestles him. But the idea that Balrogs were sent to attack Manwë and Manwë just
yeeted them.
Yeah, like with his sword. It's just, and I think apart from Fingolfin fighting Morgoth, which is an epic duel in its own right, I think it's one of the only times, apart from Tulkas as well, I think it's the only time we see a Valar being attacked directly, which is quite interesting. Although other versions of the writing had that prior to this, the Balrogs were afraid to come out of the gates of Autumno in the early days because of Oromir being present. And they were scared of him. And there is passage in the Silmarillion that makes reference to like in like during the Spring of Ardor or like the Long Dark, Oromir would keep going to Middle Earth and hunting like monsters and stuff, and eventually they all fled before him when they heard his horn. But it got me, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that was a...
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Pardon me.
Do you need to go and wipe? And I started to wonder, did this strain of thought make it into the Silmarillion? Because when Fingolfin goes to fight Morgoth, it's said that all the armies of Morgoth tremble before Fingolfin, thinking that he's Oromir himself come again. And then Morgoth is frightened and really doesn't want to fight Fingolfin face to face. So I wonder if they took that hesitancy to attack Oromir at all, and that was distilled down into just that line of, it's like they thought he was Oromir, like it's making reference to really just how fucking terrified of Oromir the armies were. But anyway, back to the history, right? So in the First Age, and before that, they were serving Morgoth and doing his bidding, and after he was thrown into jail for the first time, the Balrogs escaped the Valar by hiding in the depths of Autumno and Angband along with Sauron, and so they escaped justice, essentially. They then next reappear when Morgoth and Ungoliant start to bicker at Lamoth. Do you know where she's like, give me the Silmarils, and he's like, no.
Yeah.
And she's about to kill him.
Yeah.
Well, it's amazing. It seems she's very much capable of killing Morgoth, and he lets out a cry that forever after echoes in the hills of Lamoth, right?
Yeah.
And the Balrogs heard it deep, deep, deep underground, and so...
They were stirred.
Oh, they were. And they were described as a tempest of flame as they came to help Morgoth, and they burned away Ungoliant's webs, and it said that they drove her through the mountains of Terror, Nandungortheb, and Ered Gorgoroth, and they drove her away where she went into the south and eventually would eat herself, and she passed out of the story forever. So I can't help but stress, and there'll be other times like this where I do mention this, but if you can drive away Ungoliant, you really are not something to fuck with. Like if she could potentially kill Morgoth one-on-one, but then they could, who was, for all intents and purposes, a demigod under the one god, and the Balrogs could drive her away. It's the scale of powers. It's a bit fucking mental.
So it's a similar case to them attacking the other guy. What's he called?
Manwë. Yeah. Well, yeah. In fact, so that's another point there, right? The later on,
like they're fearless.
Well, yeah. Well,
to an extent,
when they're ordered to, I think it's that they're obedient to Morgoth more than anything.
Okay.
But it says that Manwë withered them, but then some survive. So if all of them attacked him, and some still survive, that's very impressive by itself, right? That you could imagine being it's like being struck. It would essentially be like being struck by lightning. Well, it would be withered with the lightning of his sword. But imagine being surviving a lightning strike and we're going, pussy, try again, God.
Sounds like something you would do.
No, it's like Bruce.
Stupidity.
It's like Bruce Almighty. He's like, smite me, oh mighty smiter. Anyway, but we know, so the power scaling's crazy, but remember that Maiar is a very, very broad category, but the Balrogs are somewhere near the top of it. Eonwë is the Herald of Manwë. He is the most powerful Maiar. Sauron is probably number 2. Balrogs, Gandalf look right near the top, and Gandalf's a bit debatable, but in terms of power. But the next time we see the Balrogs, are when Feanor dies, which you know from our Noldor episode. So do you know when he's pursuing the orcs through Hithlum? When it's when they just get to Beleriand and Feanor's like, I'm gonna fucking solve this in a day, and you know they're attacked by orcs. They have the battle under stars, the Dagor Nuin Gilligath, and then Feanor gets cocky because he thinks he's winning. He pursues them because he doesn't know about Angband, and then he gets to Angband, and the Balrogs come out the gates, and this is where Feanor gets mortally wounded. And to be fair, let's give him his dues here, because Feanor fights off the Balrogs for a long time. He's surrounded by flames and he's wounded again and again and again. And remember, his sons are still coming as backup. It's like Feanor's essentially by himself.
Just like a boss fight.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
surrounded by tanks.
Feanor was the boss fight for the Balrogs.
Yeah.
And that he fights on and on and on until the captain of the Balrogs appears, Gothmog. And Gothmog strikes Feanor to the ground and is about to, properly kill him when Feanor's son arrive and drive off the Balrogs. They rescue him, but Feanor dies shortly after, which we know. We'll cover Gothmog in detail in a little bit more, but let's carry on with just appearances of Balrog in general. The next time is very shortly after Feanor dies, because Morgoth immediately sends emissaries to Maedhros and the other sons of Feanor. So Maedhros is the eldest son of Feanor, right? And Morgoth says, hey, let's not fight. I'll even give you a Silmaril. Let's talk terms. Let's come and meet and maybe we can have peace. And Maedhros says, convinces everyone else to just pretend to go along with it, but we'll send more soldiers than we say we will. Well, predictably, Morgoth does exactly the fucking same. Nobody can be trusted in this. You can't trust the Noldor, you can't trust Morgoth, right? Everybody sends more soldiers than they say they will, but Morgoth sends more. And he also sends Balrogs. And it's at this point where Maedhros is kidnapped, and he's the one who spends 30 years hanging from Thangorodrim by his hand, and that Balrogs were there. The next time we see Balrogs, and you'll start to see a pattern here, is they're brought out when the muscle is required, like when the fucking shock troops are needed. And the Balrogs accompanied Glaurung the dragon at the front of the army when they burst forth from from Angband.
Yeah.
And this was during the Battle of Sudden Flame, the Dagor Bragollach.
They're the big push.
Oh yes. So this battle, Dagor Bragollach, is where Morgoth broke the siege that had kept him in Angband for 400 years, and that was called the Long Peace.
Yeah.
And it was during this 400 years humans first appeared in Beleriand, right? They thought, which we covered in our episode, where we thought they'd escaped Morgoth, only to turn up on his fucking doorstep.
Yeah.
Oops. But yeah, this Dagor Bragollach was not a good time for elves and humans, because Glaurung came out, a fierce fucking dragon. Balrogs came out after him, and they just went mental. And the battle starts with Morgoth making Thangorodrim erupt with lava, but he also puts forth belching poison fumes from the top of it as well, and it comes down over the plain of Ardgallen, like a lovely grassy area, and it burns it, turns it into choking dust, and it becomes known as Anfauglith, which means gasping dust, because it's such a poisonous place now. And it's this, the lava runs through, all the armies come out of Angband, and it's enough of a push that the elves and humans, and they're all divided into little groups and they're split off from each other.
Sounds really beautiful, actually. It does sound like a beautiful scene for a baddie. But you can imagine how you can see it in your head, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely, you can, yeah. It's very cinematic. The only good thing to come out of this, really, is that Hithlum, which is a stronghold in the north of Beleriand, it's said that no Balrog or Orc could overcome it, so that remains unconquered, even after this shit show. So then
unconquered, but on their own.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So 20 years later, or so, right, after this Dagor Bragollach, Maedhros, who's been rescued by Fingon, his cousin, he's been rescued and fighting and what have you. But anyway, Maedhros convinces the human elves to join together again. He says, we're going to push back. It's a counter-offensive. And this is called the Union of Mithros, where he brought so many disparate groups together, including Turgon, who's the king of Gondolin, which was the hidden city, which we haven't covered on the podcast yet, but it's a hidden city of elves. That is it's a very sad story in the First Age. So, the Union of Mithros, we're focusing on the Balrogs, they come together and the Union of Mithros, the elves and humans, attack Angband on the plains of Fauglith. They go back into the fucking gasping dust and they attack. Glaurung comes out again, and he was a lot stronger this time, and with him comes everything in Angband, including the Balrogs. Now, that battle might not have went as badly for the humans and the elves that time, had it not been for humans who betrayed their allies and turned on the loyal humans and the elves, and they went over to Morgoth. So it wasn't even the Balrogs in this case that were going to turn the tide. It was betrayal, and that's what caused. And this becomes known as Nirnaeth Anwediad, which is unnumbered tears, because it's such a shit show.
Yeah.
So
a perfect storm of...
You've got absolute chaos.
Yeah.
And this is where we see the tactical side of the Balrogs, because Gothmog, the captain of the Balrogs, takes advantage of this, and he kills Fingon, who is up until that point the High King of the Noldor in Middle-earth. So they're fighting, and another Balrog comes up behind Fingon and ties his legs together with his whip. And so Fingon was a badass. He'd fought right to the last. All his guards were dead about him, and he gets caught from behind by trickery. And so Gothmog strikes him in the head with his black axe. And it's said that when Fingon dies, as his skull's caved in, a white flame springs up from his head as it's split open. And what's notable here is what happens after. This is the brutality of the Balrogs, because they don't stop there. They surround him, his dead body, and they beat it into the earth with their maces. And they purposefully take Fingon's blue and silver banner and they trod it into his own blood, which is unusually brutal for Tolkien's writing. Yeah. But
it's nice because it's more meaningful than the deaths that usually take place and the unadulterated slaughter that usually happens, isn't it?
Yeah. It wasn't a very poetic
death. I mean, if someone's gonna murder me, make it special.
Yeah, absolutely. So we know I've just saw all those bugs coming in.
Yeah. Oh god. That's what I was looking at before.
Yeah. Do you want to shut the window?
Do you want to shut the window?
I can do.
He's just tied himself up with all the.
I'm covered in cables. What's that like Japanese art?
Whipped himself.
What's that like where Japanese kinky people tie themselves up?
Yeah.
I'm tied up like that with fucking microphone cables. We'll get back to Balrogs in a second, but this is disgusting. There's loads of bugs that have become attracted to the lamplight. They're going to come over here if you just do that. Right, back to Balrogs. So, we know Balrogs, they are smart, capable, ruthless, powerful. Now they are king killers. And
king killers.
Yes. Are we starting to get an idea of why Legolas was terrified of when he understood what was in Moria? So, Nirnaeth Anwediad is noted for one other thing, which I can't not mention. So, Turgon is the king of he's now the High King of the Noldor. He's able to escape back to Gondolin, the hidden city. And he was guarded at the rear by two human brothers who are very famous, Huor and Húrin, and they're soldiers.
From Whoville.
Yes. And Húrin is, Huor's the father of Tuor, who is very important in the Gondolin story.
Yeah.
Húrin is the father of Túrin, who was very important in his own story. And they fought to the last man, giving the elves time to escape. And this is one of the most valiant events that take place in the history of Middle-earth. So they fought on and on and on. And Huor was killed when an arrow hits him in the eye. It's covered in venom, smashes him in the eye, kills him, right? And the last man left was Húrin. And he threw aside his shield, and he grabbed an axe, two-handed, and he kills 70 trolls who guarded Gothmog. Like, the trolls... like
Troll in the dungeon.
Yeah, we've seen trolls in Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, and he kills 70 of them. And I had to double-check to make sure like it was definitely referencing... It wasn't just orcs.
You were like 7-0. 7-0.
Yeah, 7-0. But it specifically says that the troll
or is
blood...
it 7-0?
Yeah. No, the troll blood withered on the axe. And then it mentions later that about orcs. But it definitely seems to be 70 trolls. But every time he swung his axe, he shouted, Aure Entuluva, day shall come again. But Morgoth had ordered that Húrin should be taken alive, and Gothmog complies with this, and we see that it's at any cost. So he orders his orc soldiers not to kill him and to lay hands on him, even though Húrin keeps cutting off arms and hands of the orcs trying to grab him. But eventually they do, and Gothmog ties him up and takes him back to Angband. And I couldn't go without mentioning that. That's pretty fucking heavy, but Húrin is one of the most metal fuckers to ever exist. Well, within the story. I don't think he's actually real. So we know that Unnumbered Tears is pretty heavy, right? Like, as I've just described.
Yeah. Pretty heavy, like your stare of seriousness when we're recording.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty fucking grim subject matter sometimes.
Well, I like to keep things light-hearted. That's why I did a acrobatic sort of hand gesture there.
I know it's fantasy, but it's crazy. But it doesn't let up after Nehemiah Thanoediad, because the next time the Balrogs appear is the fall of Gondolin, which we've just talked about, Turgon's city. This city, briefly, is hidden within the mountains, and Morgoth has looked for this like for a long time, but he could never find it. And eventually, an elf called Maeglin wanted to bang his cousin, but she didn't want him, so he betrayed them to Morgoth. And he is what I would call an incel. So, in his cousin...
It's the best thing I've heard.
Yeah, he is.
All day.
Maeglin, he's a fucking incel. Like, he is. He wants to shag his cousin, right, Idril, but she marries Tuor, who is a human, so it's the second... no ever human and elf marriage, right?
Mm.
And Idril happens to be the daughter of Turgon, so she's like the princess of Gondolin. And Tuor holds the honour of being the only human to ever be counted among the elves. Like, I think so. He gets immortality as an elf, like he gets to live as an elf, which I think is pretty cool. Anyway, the Balrogs. So Morgoth's army attacks the city and it fell, and it included Balrogs here. Gothmog was finally killed here at the fall of Gondolin, when he and Ecthelion, Lord of the Fountain, killed each other. Now, Ecthelion, if you've seen the films, would know as Denethor's father, so it's Denethor, son of Ecthelion. And Denethor, from our Teleri Elves episode, you'd know that Denethor was a very famous Nandor elf who helped Thingol. And Ecthelion is a very famous Noldor elf who was the Lord of the Fountain and killed the most powerful Balrog to ever exist. So Denethor in the films and his dad both had very, very proud namesakes. But there's multiple versions of what happens when Ecthelion and Gothmog kill each other. In the Silmarillion, I think it just says like they slew each other in the fountain. In the Fall of Gondolin standalone book, I can't remember, but I assume it'll have this version of it, which is that in an earlier version, Gothmog and Tuor, the human I've just talked about, they fight each other, and Gothmog beats him, and he's about to land the killing blow when Ecthelion, who'd been very badly wounded, stands up, and he stands over Tuor's body, and with the last bit of his strength, he has a helm with a spike on. He jumps forward and he stabs Gothmog in the chest with his spiked helmet, and they both fall into the fountain and drown together, which is just fucking baller. Like, I love that. Like, just this last ditch attack using your head with a spike on it. Like, that's fucking mint. Like, so that's when Gothmog dies, the leader of the Balrogs. As the survivors of Gondolin are leaving the city, they are in the mountains. They are ambushed by orcs led by a Balrog. And this is where Glorfindel kills one. And Glorfindel we've mentioned here, there, and everywhere as a very, very, very powerful elf. And he is, he's definitely present in the book Lord of the Rings, because he is the one, instead of Arwen who in the films, Glorfindel's the one who gets Frodo to Rivendell.
Okay.
And he when he died, he was reincarnated very quickly. And then in the second age of Middle-earth, he was sent to assist, sent to assist the other elves back in Middle-earth. So he
already knew the route.
Yeah, he's an elf in very good standing. And what he does is he fights with the Balrog before he yeets them both off the cliff into the abyss, where unfortunately the Balrog is destroyed, but
so is he.
Glorfindel dies, but it doesn't really stick. Death just does not stick to that guy.
Mm-hmm.
And someone else we've talked about before pops up in this story as well, which is Thorondor, King of the Eagles. And he makes sure that no orcs escape to tell Morgoth that there are survivors of Gondolin by like picking them up and throwing them against the rocks and stuff like that. And then we come to the last bit of the first age for the Balrogs, where we see that all the remaining Balrogs are killed, it said, save for, quote, some few that fled and hid themselves in caverns inaccessible at the roots of the earth. So some of them fled. But that is the end of the first age, and then in the second age we don't really have anything that talks about Balrogs, because the ones who survived are scattered throughout the world. It's not until the third age that we see a Balrog again, and this is the Balrog that we know the most, we know is the most famous one.
Mm.
And it's essentially, this has all been in the origin story of Durin's Bane in Moria. But it does give me shivers to think that somewhere scattered around Middle-earth there might be more Balrogs. Tolkien went back and forward on the numbers, but he eventually settled on there being no more than 7.
Oh, right.
But anyway, so between the first age, like the War of Wrath, and the next time we see a Balrog, about more than 5,000 years pass. So it just sleeps for 5,000 years. It's just at the bottom of the Misty Mountains. It's woken by the dwarves who, under Durin the Sixth, their king, they were mining for mithril in Khazad-dûm in the Misty Mountains. And can you guess why he's called Durin's Bane?
Because he's an absolute pain. Durin.
He kills Durin. He kills Durin the Sixth, and he also kills his successor. So Durin the Sixth is killed, and Nain is the next dwarf king. He also gets killed by Durin's Bane. So this series of events culminates with the dwarves finally fleeing Moria in 1981 of the Third Age, which from our Witch King episode, we know this is roughly a year after the Witch King returns to Mordor, and he started to gather the Nazgul to him before they go on to attack the city of Ithilien in the year 2000 of the Third Age. And then, so you've got King Durin the Sixth, dead. King Nain the First, dead. The next dwarf king is Thrain the First, who is the namesake of Thorin Oakenshield's father, Thrain the Second. But Thrain the First is quite far removed from Thrain the Second, because there is a lot of kings after that. Because I remember looking at the etymology and seeing that there was Thrain, then a couple of others, and then there was Glowin the First. And I was like, oh shit, that's Gimli's dad. And then it turns out it wasn't. It was just another
Glowin.
It was it
was a popular name them days.
Well, no, it was even further back in the history. So they hadn't been born yet. So I was like, fucking hell, this is a long time. But anyway, interestingly though, when the orcs came after everyone had fled Khazad-dûm, Durin's Bane didn't seem to mind them. And and the reason for this is, I'll come on to this later when I talk about the Balrogs' power, is that they're all on a fundamental level, like, you know that Morgoth tainted the world?
Yeah.
He marred Arda.
Yeah.
The way one of the things he did was allow evil to grow independently. And I think that they're still on like I want to say like genetic level, or like there's some impulse that's like, we all serve the same master still, even though he's gone. Yeah,
even though they have their odd bickerings in between each other occasionally.
Exactly. You fucking nailed it there. So that's why I think he tolerated them, because they all understand on some level that we still serve the will of Morgoth.
Yeah.
Even if the orcs would never.
So it's like,
no.
Oh, bit of a pain in the arse. A bit like these flies.
Yeah.
You know, a bit of a pain in the arse, but will exist with yous.
Yeah, exactly. So
can't be bothered to use my energy to thwack you out.
Yeah. So when the Fellowship came through Moria, the Balrog was walking and came after them. And Legolas knew it immediately for a Balrog and shot himself. Understandable, right? Gimli knew that it was Durin's Bane.
But from the stories and everything passed down.
Yeah, he knows this is what killed Durin, but I don't know if he knew it was a Balrog. So Gandalf, being a Maiar, took a stand against the Balrog, who was also a Maiar, and they clashed. And the Balrog, I don't think I realised this, but how significant this was. But the Balrog's weapon actually broke against Glamdring. Like, Glamdring broke a Balrog's weapon, which...
What was his weapon?
Because
I just thought it was a whip from the...
No, a sword. He's got a sword and a whip.
Ah, right, okay.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool that, like, Elvish-made swords stood up to a blow from, like, something that powerful. Which is pretty cool. But we know what happens next, right? Because, you've read the... we've read the book, seen the films. Is that they both fall...
I've read the back of the DVDs, sorted.
they have an epic... So they have an epic battle, right? So it's 8 days of pursuit through the mountains. Like, the Balrog tries to escape and Gandalf follows it, right? For 8 days until they'd make it to the top of the peak of the Misty Mountains. And that's where they fight. And their fight lasts for 3 days and 2 nights before Gandalf finally triumphs.
Do they not have any snack breaks?
None at all. None at all. Does
Does Gandalf just piss himself if he needs the toilet?
It's just the intensity of the fight. Yeah, like this is two powerful fucking beings fighting. Like,
yeah.
So imagine you
just piss yourself. Just let it go, Gandalf.
Yeah.
He'd be dehydrated really at this point, wouldn't he?
All poo poos.
He would be dried out.
All poo poo time is pee pee time, but not all pee pee time is poo poo time.
His private parts would be like, those X-hoses where they're all shriveled up and then you turn the tap on and they expand. His would be the shriveled up version. He'd be that dehydrated after that long.
You're right, you're disgusting. But yeah.
You can see it though, can't
you? Yeah. They fight for 3 days and 2 nights before the Balrog dies and breaks up on the mountainside, and then Gandalf also dies. But unlike the Balrog, Gandalf comes back as Gandalf the White. So that is 2 people who have come back to life after fighting a Balrog, and 1 who hasn't with Ecthelion, although he probably would still have made it back to Valinor eventually. So I quite like my odds that if I ever come across a Balrog, I'll fight it, because there's a chance, even if I die, I'll come back to life. So, But right, after that, there is no more mention of Balrogs in history, so that's pretty exhaustive, right? That's their history. That's the history of Balrogs. Chronologically, from the First Age to the Third Age, there's no more mention of them in the Fourth Age or beyond, which is fucking great. Unless some poor bastard did wake up other Balrogs, but just never survived to talk about it. So let's talk about the power of Balrogs now, right? I read this somewhere and it's pissing me off that I cannot track the source down. So, for the first time on the podcast, I think it's Nature of Middle-earth, where it's I think the section's called like the Oswey Cantor or something like that, where Tolkien talks about like Fëa and Hroa and spirits that don't need that. But for the first time, I'm just going to have to say you're going to have to trust me until I can remember where the source is. But I remember reading that Maiar, like Balrogs, and Eonwe, and Valar, like Morgoth and Tulkas, are so physically powerful. Well, not really Morgoth. He's powerful in other ways to do with the physical world as opposed to his physical form. But the reason that they're so powerful in the material world is because they divest so much of their power into their physical form. And that makes them more powerful. But it also limits them because they aren't able to like exist without these bodies eventually.
Yeah.
Eonwe is a bit of an exception to this because Eonwe is the chief of the Maiar, and he might be able to just like split his power enough that he's still more powerful but can still do other shit that Maiar do. But Balrogs in particular, I'm pretty sure that the reason they're so powerful in a physical sense, like in a martial fighting sense, is because they divested so much of their power. And Tolkien does talk about evil beings becoming wedded to their physical forms by their evil deeds, so that the more you do it, like the more you're stuck. And we see that Sauron and Morgoth also have the same thing. They eventually become stuck in their forms, their physical forms. They can't shapeshift anymore. And with Morgoth, that is because he's divested so much of his power into corrupting the planet of Arda itself. He corrupts the actual world, whereas with Sauron, he pours so much of his being into the One Ring, then suffers the catastrophic destruction of Numenor, which he was caught in, because it's after that. So
there's not an awareness that this is happening as they're doing it?
I don't think so. Or like they think, like, I want power over this world rather than the unseen world.
Yeah.
And I remember...
They don't have the forethought.
Maybe not, yeah. But Tolkien writes in Letter 200 that if a physical body is married to evil deeds, is destroyed, then it's essentially nullified. So until that body can be rebuilt, then they're fucked, essentially. And Balrogs are an example of this, because unlike Gandalf, who's like a Maiar, and even Saruman, who we see when he dies in the books, his body rises like a mist before he gets blown away by Manwë, and he's consigned to just wander the earth as a spirit. But essentially, when a Balrog dies, like its physical body is destroyed, it's done for. It's nullified to the point of almost non-existence, because it's poured all of its power into its physical form, which gives it the massive amount of power to fucking strike fear and kill armies and like destroy cities.
Live fast, die young.
Yeah, exactly. You burn twice as bright for half as long. Live, laugh, love. Yeah, live, laugh, love, Balrogs. But yeah, that's so. Again, until I can find the exact source of where he talked about your physical body and pouring more of your essence into your physical side gives you more power, I'm just going to have to ask you to trust me. And if there is anyone who knows what I'm talking about, please do let me know. That would be fantastic. And another thing I want to talk about, I alluded to it earlier with the Balrogs and the Orcs, is that Tolkien wrote a footnote where he credits Morgoth for divesting his power into Arda. Like when he mars Arda, that this is a way to give power to his servants, so that regardless of whether Morgoth is there or not, his servants will gather together again and again without specific instructions. So that might be the reason why the Orcs came to Moria in the first place, is that it's just that unconscious desire that like we will gather together as armies. So like it was wrote that Balrogs and Orcs and that community against Sauron, because Sauron is just an agent of Morgoth, they can do that while still being obedient to the spirit of Morgoth himself. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's just cool. It says that part of Morgoth's native power was given to making evil grow independently outside of his control, which that is pretty fucking diabolical. Like, if that's right, like, because he wanted to destroy, but you never think that. I don't think I'd ever seen any reference to him having the forethought that he was like, even if I'm not here, I'm still gonna fuck things up.
Yeah.
Which is just pretty fucking cool. But yeah, talking more about it, it says, so in regards to the will of Morgoth and the obedience, blah, 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 Tolkien writes, it will there be seen that the wills of orcs and balrogs, etc., are part of Melkor's power dispersed. Their spirit is one of hate, but hate is non-cooperative, except under direct fear. Hence the rebellions, mutinies, etc., where Morgoth seems far off. Orcs are beasts, and Balrogs corrupted Maya. Also, Morgoth, not Sauron, is the source of orc wills. Sauron is just another, if greater, agent. Orcs can rebel against him without losing their own irredeemable allegiance to evil. Morgoth. Aule wanted love, but of course had no thought of dispersing his power. Only Eru can give love and independence. If a finite sub-creator tries to do this, he really wants absolute loving obedience, but it turns into robotic servitude and becomes evil. So orcs and what have you, that's the consequence of trying to give something like free will and make it love you, which is pretty cool. So one of the last things I want to talk about, two more things, is Gothmog himself, because he's a notable figure for being the chief of the Balrogs, and then I just want to talk about some of the earlier versions of how they've evolved. So, Gothmog was the High Captain of Angband, and this puts him either on par or just below Sauron in terms of authority. And his name in Elvish, which I'm assuming it's Quenya because it didn't mention Sindarin and it was quite murky, the etymologies. But his name means dread oppressor, and Goth means dread, which is pretty funny. Like, because they're all so depressed. Even big titty goth girls got a frown sometimes. So his earliest names in Gnomish, which is the language before we get Quenya and Sindarin, etc., like, it went through phases. So his name used to mean strife and hatred. And in early versions of Quenya, his other names were Kalimbo, Cosmot, and Cosmoko. Which I think I like Kalimbo. Like Kalimbo.
Very tribal sounding.
Yeah, Kalimbo Slice. So in much earlier versions of the Legendarium, when I mentioned, like when he fights Tuor and is then killed by Ecthelion Spike, it said that Gothmog actually breaks through the gates of Gondolin because the Balrogs and the orcs and that they can't climb the stone. It's too well built, they can't climb the walls. So he breaks into Gondolin by piling his iron siege equipment against the doors until it breaks. And that is a whole other thing, right? Because in early versions of Tolkien's writings, at the fall of Gondolin, there are tanks. Like, Morgoth had tanks built, and they're called iron dragons. But they are massive iron machines, beasts, that are able to move slowly over very rough terrain and hold orcs inside them. That sounds very tank-like to me. But it's absolutely fascinating. Like, these dragons could also breathe fire as well. So, like, yeah. But completely inanimate. So there weren't actual dragons. It was machines.
Yeah.
Which I just think it's but yeah, it sounds very familiar for someone whose only experience of tanks is from World War One when they used to get stuck in the mud and shit.
Yeah.
But it's just like, boom. How's this for a slice of fried gold? In earliest writings, Gothmog was said to be the child of Morgoth and of an ogress called Fluithwin. But later, Tolkien decided that the Valar wouldn't have children, so it was changed. And another one of this that got changed is Eonwe, the chief of the Maya, who I've mentioned, originally was envisioned as Manwë's son. And then it was changed, and Tolkien decided the Valar wouldn't have kids. So Morgoth and Eonwe were at one point children of the Valar.
That's really kind of them, because the amount of children that we have to know the names of is ridiculous.
Yeah, true. Another version is that in early versions of the Children of Húrin, there is reference to a lord of Balrogs called Lungorthin, but then Christopher Tolkien said that it's probably just a title that simply means a Balrog lord and not really specific to Gothmog. But yeah, I wanted to call him out, and that was just pretty cool. And then moving on to the last bit, the early versions of Balrogs, is that Balrogs were initially envisioned as different things at different times, right? So before Tolkien settled on the idea that evil couldn't create properly and could only subcreate, he had Balrogs as demons made by Morgoth in the pits of Autumnal during the Long Darkness. And this was quickly discarded because obviously Tolkien settled on that evil cannot create, only corrupt. There was another version which saw them as the most numerous in this version because they were just simply like another type of orc. They were just like a tougher orc, and they had armor and of iron. They had normal weapons, and there was thousands and thousands of them. But later he settled and said that like there should not be supposed more than say 3 or at most 7.
Yeah, they lose their mystery and their power in numbers, don't they?
Oh, they 100% do. Yeah. And then there is some last quotes. So there's the Book of Lost Tales, Lost Road, and Morgoth's Ring. But I've already read the Morgoth's Ring one, which was about there being 7. So he wrote in the Book of Lost Tales that the early conception of Balrogs makes them less terrible and certainly more destructible than they afterwards became. They existed in hundreds and were slayed by Tuor and the Gondolithim in large numbers. Oh, sorry, that was Christopher Tolkien who wrote that. So he's talking about the development of them because there's references to like Tuor kills 5, Ecthelion kills 3, and then 40 by like warriors.
So he's just trying to make the numbers make sense.
Yeah, exactly. And then in the Lost Roads, there was when Glaurung was called Glormund, which is one of his earlier names. There's a passage that says, "There came wolves and serpents, and there came Balrogs 1,000." And they do just kind of lose their luster if there's more than 7.
Well, it just makes it seem like the world wouldn't exist if there was that many and they were that powerful, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I think what he did in the end was the best.
Yeah.
That they are singular and that they are absolutely terrifying. Because I do, like, as you get, so like,
you can't fathom being terrified of that many things because when there's a large number of something, it just becomes your brain makes it lesser so that you can comprehend it.
Yeah, you're right. It gets normalized. Oh, 100%. Yeah. But yeah, that's Balrogs. It's in
a nutshell.
Yeah. Like I said, there was a lot in it. Like I was quite surprised by just how much there was with Balrogs.
I've been quite surprised of how interesting it is.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I'm so well, did you find it okay? Good.
Yeah, enjoyed finding out about Balrogs and things connecting in my brain with other episodes.
It is nice because
which makes me feel like a massive nerd.
It's good, isn't it? Because it is connecting to like other, like they weave in and out events that we've talked about previously, or they're connected to people we've talked about previously, or they're now going to connect to people that we will talk about or events we will talk about.
Yeah,
which is just pretty cool, and I look forward to making memes about an incel, which I've coined that term myself. So Tolkien coined eucatastrophe, and I've coined incel.
Right, so I've got a question. It's very serious.
Go on.
Would you rather have to spend every waking hour with an incel trapped in a padded room, or have 1,000 Balrogs hanging off your testicles?
I don't need my testicles that much. I don't want to spend that much time with Maeglin or his dad, Eol. They're just absolute fucking drips, man. Like, he betrays a whole city because his cousin doesn't want to shag him. His fucking cousin. Blood cousin. And his dad only got with his mum because he damn near fucking rapes her. Like, in that he takes her by force to be his wife. And it like, there's a passage that says, like, oh, she wasn't wholly unwilling. What the fuck does that mean? What the fuck? I wouldn't have fucking married you if you were like, I'm not wholly unwilling.
We're a modern audience, though.
Yeah. but if you were like, I'm not wholly unwilling, I'd be like, get the fuck out.
And this is meant to be like almost, I see a lot of things as like quite medieval.
Yeah, it is medieval, but still, like, it's pretty fucked up. But anyway, yes, that was Balrogs. Thank you for sticking with us. Just a reminder that I'm running a half marathon for charity in September. It's a Great North Run. I'll be running 13.1 miles, which is a lot for a big fat bastard. I'm running that for Guide Dogs, which provides trained canine companions to people with sight problems. There's a link in the bio to the Just Giving. There's a link on our Instagram page. On Friday, the 12th of April, starting at 7 p.m. GMT until 7 a.m. GMT, I'll be doing a 12-hour live stream where I'll be playing Lord of the Rings games, talking about Lord of the Rings stuff, like anything to raise money for charity. So if you can come along and support me, please do. Like I said, we don't monetize this podcast. There's no plans to monetize this podcast. So if you're ever going to support us monetarily, please give to charity.
Yeah. And it's not even just providing guide dogs. It's a lot of different supports for people with visual impairment.
Yeah.
Children, fighting laws and guidance, and yeah. So there's a lot that goes into it. More than just the cute little puppies, which we all love.
Yes, there is a lot that goes into it. It's a fantastic cause, and I'm proud to be fundraising for them. My training's going well, if anyone's wondering. On Instagram, after every run, I do a little off-the-cuff tubby training Tolkien talks, where it's a minute and a half, literally, where I'll just some tidbit about Tolkien trivia, just to show you that I am training. And if you go on the Just Giving page, my Strava's linked to it as well, so you can see that when I'm getting my runs in, you can see the distance that I've ran. I don't put the time on because I'm very, very slow runner because I'm very fat. I'm ashamed because I'm a dwarf. I'm very dangerous over short distances. It's a slog going over long distances, but you
do look like a dwarf as well when you run.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I'm out tomorrow for a fucking 12-kilometer run, so that's like 7-8 miles or something like that. So
when Gimli's running across the scene where he's running across the mountainous range.
Just keep breathing. That's the key.
Yeah, that's what Chris looks like.
That's it. That's pretty much it. Yeah. So yes, that's enough of me prattling on. But please do support us in any way you can. Come and give us a follow on Instagram. And I should have done this at the beginning of the episode. There is a supporter called Gabriel who donated quite a large sum of money to the Just Giving. And I would just like to say thank you, Gabriel, whoever you are.
Incredibly generous.
That's incredibly generous. And you left a lovely little note about the podcast. So, again, just thank you. Well, yeah, right. I think that's about it. So I'm going to say goodbye from me, Chris.
And bye from Rebecca.
Bye.
Toodle pip.